All right, we're live, American Hammers TV. I'm joined by my friend Roshane Thomas from the Athletic UK. Roshane, thanks for coming on again. Really appreciate it. How are you doing, first and foremost? How are you doing? Your loved ones doing? Everyone doing all right?
Well, thanks for having me on the show again, Justin. And yeah, everyone's fine, thanks. Loved ones are well. We're just trying to cope during these difficult times like everyone else, really.
Yeah, yeah, that's what we're all trying to do, trying to take it one day at a time. Um, Glad to hear you're doing well. Obviously, we'll just dive right into it. Obviously, some big news coming out of the Premier League. There's obviously been a lot of debate going on, a lot of news stories leaking out from some of the meetings that have been held between the league and the managers and some of the player representatives. But today we found out um, that the Premier League will allow for small group training, I believe are the words, starting tomorrow. So first of all, I personally don't know the difference. Is there even a difference between small group training and the training that teams normally do? Is it essentially splitting up the team into different groups
Yeah.
and they have to
I
stay?
think I'm right in saying that they'll be split up into like five different groups, what I'm saying. And
Okay.
it will be different because there'll be no contact sports, so and also
Mhm.
while keeping social distancing. So that's a key factor. And yeah, it'll be different to what players are normally used to. And also at Rush Green, they'll also be checking like temperatures upon arrival at the training ground, and they'll be doing like a regular testing as well to make sure the players are fine. So yeah, so this is life now for the players. Well, a lot of players really.
Yeah. And so putting that aside though, I'd like to ask your opinion straight up. Um, it seems like the Premier League, from an outside perspective, is putting money ahead of player health, meaning they're trying to do whatever they can to get the season underway as soon as possible so that they retrieve a lot of the TV rights money that they would otherwise lose. You've had players, Kevin De Bruyne, I know a couple months said that the players need 4 weeks. Raheem Sterling came out a couple days ago saying players need 5 weeks of training. You mentioned right before we started recording that Steve Bruce said that players need 6 weeks of training. And what we're hearing is that while small, and it's not even real training, it's small group training starting tomorrow. And ideally, they want to start June 12th, which is a little less than 3 weeks. So it seems like they're putting not only players' injury risk in the back seat, but they're also, putting players' health and their families' health at risk due to the whole COVID virus. So, just your opinion on that whole situation. Should the Premier League even be considering going back to work now?
Yeah, I reckon it's more so a case of like the financial implication of not completing the season. So like the money we receive from broadcast and whatnot, and if they were to not avoid the season, what would happen there? And I feel like that's the biggest thing the Premier League are trying to avoid right now. Well, we're trying to avoid is just this whole thing unfolded really. And I mean, I know you express Raheem Sterling, Steve Bruce, and others, but two other names like Danny Rose and Troy Deeney, they've also expressed concerns about returning. I mean, Troy Deeney has a young child, and I mean, many other players have young child. I mean, us at the Athletic reported that players like living with a family member who's currently in remission for cancer. So there's many players who are experiencing like issues like in the household not related to football. So when you say it like that, I mean, it is true that perhaps the Premier League could look at doing things a lot different. But I mean, the biggest thing is like the financial implication. That's what the Premier League is trying to avoid right now. So they're doing everything they can to get it going. I mean, I reckon they looked at the Bundesliga and thought, if we can do something similar to that, then we
Yeah.
can just get it completed as soon as possible. Because I mean, for the matches that they'll play at the home stadium for some of the teams. So they'll never mention of anything like neutral grounds. You know, the supporters are trusting not to turn up, and I feel like that's what they should do here. Trust the fans to not turn up to ground and to get it completed as soon as possible. Really.
Yeah, I wanted to ask your opinion on the neutral venue argument that
Yeah.
a lot of teams, especially the teams lower in the table, have been arguing against doing. And when you look at the model like the Bundesliga, who are playing their matches in the appropriate home stadiums, it seems like from what you just said that the Premier League should attempt to trust fans and trust people to not congregate around the stadiums when matches are being played. Is that your take on it, or do you think that neutral venues are the right avenue to go down?
In my opinion, I don't feel like neutral venues it's a solution rather because, as I mentioned previously, like if you're a team like West Ham or any of the bottom six teams, like you want your supporters to be there to cheer you on. I mean, playing the game behind closed doors, no atmosphere. I mean, the only person really that can get you going is yourself or the manager. And you sometimes need that third person, which is the supporters as well. But normally, no, it's the 12-man supporters. And
Yeah.
you need that. You need that, especially as I mentioned, the teams that are like the bottom six teams. If you're a team like Dortmund or like a top six team, perhaps you can get away with it a little bit because you know what I mean. It's not a life and death swap. You know what I mean. But it's not like a life and death scenario in terms of going down where you can lose so much money, sort of thing. So yeah, as I mentioned, I feel like that's one of the reasons why playing in home stadiums is the best option. And I mean, again, at neutral grounds, this won't be the same for players. We saw
No.
at the weekend. I mean, many players came up to me and said it was a bit weird, you know, playing behind closed doors. I mean, my colleague Raphael put out a piece on what it was like for managers, journalists, and how they found it. And when he said they found it weird, odd experience.
Yeah.
So yeah, all in all, I reckon the neutral ground is the way forward. They should trust the supporters not to turn up to grounds. And yeah, I reckon supporters will follow the advice they're given.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. Um, Now, there are really two scenarios here. It looks like they're going to attempt to go forward with it, right? But as you and I both know, that plan could easily fall apart if there's an outbreak amongst the team. Um, if there's an outbreak or a spike in cases in the UK in general. So I guess I'm going to ask you two questions. So in scenario number one, if the season does go forward and they do start playing in mid-June, it's they're not going to be able to finish by the end of June, which is when a lot of player contracts end.
Yeah.
I've read somewhere and heard some things saying that the Premier League teams are going to ask certain players whose contracts are expiring to sign small extensions into July, maybe. Have you heard anything about that in terms of the potential of extending contracts? If not, I'm just curious also at a very base level, like what you think will happen if contracts are not extended into July. Like are teams just going to be short players?
Yeah, I've heard of that. I mean, in terms of West Ham, I say the club quite fortunate in the case where the only two players from my memory that's out of contract this summer will be Pablo Zabaleta and Carlos Sanchez. And I mean,
Yeah.
they haven't been, well, Zabaleta played a few games, but they haven't been first team regulars. So if it's a scenario where the club opt to not renew their contract, I mean, West Ham won't be like crying, put it that way. I mean, there's enough cover for that. But there's teams, there's one team in particular, I think it may be I can't remember the top of my head, but there's one team in particular that have like six players out of contract this summer. And I mean,
Wow.
that scenario, yeah, that scenario is a bit crazy when you think about it. And I feel like it will be a case where they have to like possibly renew the contract like towards the end of June or July rather, because the
Yeah.
number of games. If there's a scenario where a player becomes infected with coronavirus, if they have to go in self isolation, that means someone else has to take their place. All of these sort of factors may come into place once it does resume. So, and I reckon it sounds bad me saying this, but I reckon it will be inevitable where someone perhaps contracts coronavirus. I mean, it's just gonna happen. It's just gonna happen.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even in the Bundesliga, I think it was a second division team. They had multiple, two or three players right before, last week, right before the first games resumed. They contracted it, but the league has continued on. I do think that unless there's a major outbreak amongst a team or a couple of teams, that even if there's a couple of people that contract it, they are going to continue to move forward. Now, what if though the plan does fall apart somehow? Hopefully it doesn't, but let's say it does. And the Premier League is resigned to the fact that they're going to need to declare the season null and void. I know we spoke about this a month and a half ago, last time you were on the show, about our opinions on how to deal with the title and relegation. I'm more specifically interested in your take on relegation because obviously that's where West Ham falls in the discussion. I've heard I've heard weighted points per game. I've heard unweighted points per game. I've heard just as it is in the standings. That's how you're going to deal with the finish.
We've heard about everything, Justin. We've had everything.
What's that?
I said we've heard every possible solution to try and solve the season. You know what I mean?
Really? I know. I mean, and France did unweighted, I believe, and I know League Two came out and said that they want to cancel the season and also do an unweighted. But I've also heard that they may do weighted as well. Have you heard anything about like if the Premier League is declared null and void? Do you have any idea? And if not an idea, do you have any opinion of how it should be dealt with?
Yeah. Well, there's been reported that it could perhaps be decided by weight points per game, home and away. Now, the thing behind this is that it has West Ham in the bottom three.
Yeah.
So, as far as West Ham is concerned, this is the worst possible scenario because I mean the team will suffer relegation. In terms of how it could perhaps be solved, I'm honestly not even too sure, Justin. the honest truth, I'm honestly not too sure because there's so many factors behind that. I mean, if it is decided by points per game, as you mentioned previously, I mean, I can imagine just like the lawsuits and whatnot that will be involved in that because 9 games to go in the season, and there's been previous seasons where a team have gone on a run and escaped relegation. Obviously, we know this can't happen now due to the current pandemic, but I mean, there's been previous seasons where teams gone on a run and stayed up. Like, top of my mind, I can think of like West Brom, Leicester City over recent years.
Yeah.
Because of like, obviously, I know what's happening right now, but I mean, there's every chance we had a chance of like, escaping, a secure survival rather. So yeah, in terms of how it'll be solved, I'm honestly not too sure. But as long as it's not weighted points per game home and away, then I'm fine with that because as I mentioned, that has West Ham in a relegation zone, and we don't want that.
I mean, it would really be surreal to have a team that technically is not in the current bottom three to actually be relegated. It would be unprecedented, I would think. I don't know if there would be any other situation that has occurred in the past like that. So, I mean, we've talked about what it would mean for West Ham potentially if we did have that weighted points per game structure. Let's cross our fingers that that's not the route the Premier League decides to take. But what does this mean? This whole situation, obviously, even if the Premier League season is resumed, has negatively affected teams financially, and West Ham is not immune from that either. So, have you heard anything in terms of how this whole pandemic has affected West Ham financially? And do you think that the financial hit the club has taken will force the club's hand in selling some players that they could get a decent chunk of change for?
I mean, that is a fair point. I mean, as you mentioned, it won't just be West Ham in this situation. This faces a lot of other Premier League clubs. I mean, you have to look at the fact that Karen Brady and David Moyes, they both voluntarily took a 30% wage cut in order to like make sure full-time staff were still paid. So there's stuff like that the club have been doing. And I mean, in terms of like, let's say for example, like Summer, for example, when it comes to recruiting players, I mean, it's going to be tough for the club to like try and like sign like a 30-40 million player. I don't think we'll see like any sort of high like a lot of money invested in players this summer due to what's going on. I reckon if anything, it gives the club a chance to like look at young players in the youth team and give them a chance moving forward, like Grady, Nathan Holland, another player like Alexander Silva, and other players like that come to mind. But I mean, the financial impact of the coronavirus could be felt by clubs for not just this season, but even next season.
Yeah.
Because it's been March since the game was played. I mean, West Ham were away in their last match to Arsenal, but it's been almost 2 months rather since we've seen any action in this country. So yeah, it's gonna be felt for a long time, in my opinion.
Do you think that there could be players sold, like two players come to mind, a Felipe Anderson and Emmanuel Lanzini, two players who do have a lot of talent, have exhibited that talent at times, but have really, I mean, in Manuel Lanzini's case, he's no longer in the first team. Felipe was on the fringe of going out of the first team. And I think those are two guys that you could get a good chunk of change for, maybe 20 million for Felipe and another 10 for Manuel. Do you think that you're going to start seeing some wholesale selling of some players potentially?
Well, those two players perhaps could be on the market. And I mean, another player that comes to mind is Yarmolenko. Another player like him who's been injury prone due to time at West Ham. I mean, 20 million from Lanzini would be great, in my opinion, because he's regressed so much to suffering that knee injury while on international duty with Argentina. So something like that, or as you mentioned, Anderson. But I mean, 20 million for Anderson, that'll be what, 17 million cash loss. The best part of 17 million because he spent so much money. So when you weigh up like that, is that really worth it? But I reckon perhaps fringe players will see move on this summer.
Yeah. And also I'm curious because a lot of reporting has been done about, you mentioned certain players like Troy Deeney and Danny Rose, and I know Jose Mourinho had some pretty strong opinions in the article in The Athletic that I read earlier this morning. And you've had some other outspoken managers like Frank Lampard and Graham Potter. I really haven't heard a whole lot from West Ham except for very early in this whole pandemic. Karen Brady probably was the first person to say that the season should be declared null and void. Has that continued to be West Ham's stance in these meetings, or are there some people within the club that do want to continue the season and do want to play out the remainder of the fixtures?
Well, if you remember, when Karen really said that with her column, I mean, the action after was just crazy. I mean, everyone's like, "What on earth is Karen talking about?"
Right.
She's only saying that because West Ham on a relegation zone, so like it suits West Ham agenda to have the season null and void. But I feel like most of them, not just with Karen Brady, but I feel like other Premier League teams, the ideal solution to get the season finished, and then move on towards next season. Because as I mentioned before, like, it's already bad financially for clubs, but I mean, if a season were to like not continue, and as I mentioned, broadcast money, how that's going to impact clubs financially and whatnot. I mean, I know it's just slightly off topic, but even stuff like season ticket renewals, even that's been an issue for some supporters. We don't know what's going on with like West Ham in regards to like whether they'll get a refund for games that they purchased, like away matches like Newcastle and so forth that are supposed to take place, games for next season. So it's going to be crazy moving forward, but yeah, I feel like we'll know more in the coming days. But West Ham starts now is to get the season finished.
Yeah, I think West Ham are only one of maybe 5 or so clubs that haven't publicly stated whether or not that they're going to give season ticket renewals.
Yeah.
I know many other clubs have. At the end of the day, Roshane, what is your prediction with all this? Do you think that the plan that has been set in place as of right now, training tomorrow, mid-June start, probably a mid-July finish, do you think that is actually going to happen? Or do you think that something somewhere down the road will eventually cease all of those plans? What do you think at the end of the day is? What are we going to talk about?
I don't think it will resume June 12th. Like that's just I don't think perhaps the end of June. If we're being realistic, I mean, I'm in agreement with what Raheem Sterling and Steve Bruce have said. I mean, you need the best part of at least 5 weeks, maybe even 6, to at least make sure the players are like physically peak for match conditions. I mean, will the season finish or will it finish end of July? I mean, there's been so many factors already that's prevented it from happening. I mean, as you mentioned, players are coming out expressing concerns. You know, some players are like, we're breaking lockdown rules as well, stuff like that. So there's been many factors that's just like having an impact. And I mean, we saw earlier about the Scottish season; they've cancelled their season. So the only hope we have right now is what the Bundesliga have done, and for the Premier League to follow suit. But if it becomes an issue where the health of the players just has been compromised, then there could be a point when the Premier League are like, you know what, it's not safe to continue. We need to look at alternatives. So that's the worst case scenario, as I mentioned, the financial impact that will cause. But I mean, yeah, those are the 2 options I see.
I mean, do you think that there's a point? Do you think there's a point though, in terms of a point on the calendar where they're going to have to either say, here's the point of no return. We either need to start by this date and finish by this date. Otherwise, you're putting next season and the season after into jeopardy. Because, like, we're already delaying this season. Like, what's going to happen to next? I mean, is there there's got to be some sort of time frame by which they say
it has to start at some point in June. has to start at some point in June. I mean, well, at some point in June, like 12th of June onwards, I had to start. I mean, as you mentioned, contracts, players out of contract this summer. I mean, like if they suffer an injury, that's them screwed in terms of getting a new club. You know, that's
Right.
the impact of that will happen. So at some point in June, if it's not resumed by at least June 30th, if they
All right, guys. It seems like we've lost Roshane due to some technical difficulties. Um, but yeah, like Roshane said, and I agree with him. I personally think that the Premier League needed to have started by the end of May to finish by the end of June due to the contract issues. But I don't see how the Premier League can continue the 1920 season past the end of July unless they are willing to significantly change the format of um, or the timing of seasons ahead. I've put out some articles that have put out the potential of using the fact that the World Cup in 2022 is in November, and planning the season around that. But it seems like many fans and clubs don't want that. They want to finish this season ASAP and start the next season up as close to normal timing as possible. So, I don't know when Roshane's going to come back, but I think, I mean, that was going to be my last question anyways. We were probably going to wrap up. We'll see what happens. Premier League set to resume small group training tomorrow. I think Roshane's about to come back.
can you hear me, Justin?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yep.
Oh, my apologies. My laptop just shut off for some reason.
No
My laptop
worries.
just shut off.
No worries. I did a
I
little bit
forgot.
of improvising while you were gone, so it's all good.
No
Yeah,
worries. We were
I
talking
think.
about playing contract, right?
Yeah, you were saying how you need to start it in June. You need to resume in
Yeah.
June.
I need to start resuming at some point in June because then if it's we're still pondering about what's the best solution to restart the league, it's going to get ridiculous from that point onwards. As I mentioned, the Bundesliga has given us hope that football can return in a safe way.
Yep.
So, in my opinion, the Premier League should follow suit. We should end the season as quick as we can, really.
Yeah, and I was saying while you were offline there, I was just saying that in my opinion, that they needed to start by the end of this month to really. That was my opinion, and they certainly need to finish in July. Otherwise, you're really starting to get into a situation where you're going to have to be willing to change up the timing of next season and possibly the season after. I've written some blogs that have stated that maybe they can use the fact that the 2022 World Cup is in November to its advantage, but also, I don't think that would ever be possible. I think the timing of next season needs to be as normal as possible because you do have other leagues like the Bundesliga starting and resuming already. You do have leagues like League One who have already said it's done, the Dutch league. So you're going to have to start no later than September, I feel like.
And one thing I feel like hasn't been discussed enough is that this pandemic could also creep into next season. I mean, it's not as if it's just going to be like, oh, we finished this season and we're back to normal, everything's fine again. I mean, it could creep into next season as well. That could be delayed too. So that's
Yeah.
also something else to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this whole situation, it puts things into perspective. Obviously, sports are there's life and then there's sports, right? And we do hope everyone watching this is doing well and that their loved ones are doing well too and continue to do so. But at the same time, we miss soccer, we miss sport very much, and we do want it back as soon as possible, of course, within the guidelines of local government and national government as well. Well, Roshane, I think that's a good time to wrap it up. Thanks for coming on. Of course, as always, it's a pleasure speaking with you. And yeah, hopefully sooner rather than later, we can have another show where we actually talk about a match result.
Yeah, football being back at West Ham winning again.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, that might be a little longer, but we'll see. All right, man. Take care. Again, really appreciate the time.
And also, thanks everyone for your comments as well. Much appreciated.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.